Oh, good morning. It's Tom Jordan. So nice to have you back here on Tom Jordan Live. It is a Friday. We're heading into the weekend, a busy week, right? From the nation's capital, the new White House press secretary, Karoline Leavitt, took to the podium this week. And on her first day, fielded a whole slew of pretty tough questions from a variety of reporters for nearly an hour without relying on this massive binder of pre-scripted answers. It's a huge, I think, welcome contrast from her predecessors. And what does it say about her ability to handle the job? It says quite a bit, actually. It is night and day. Under the previous administration, the press secretaries, including the latest, Corinne Jean-Pierre, stuck to reporters and to answers with pre-approved talking points and dodged a whole slew of tough questions with rehearsed, pretty much non-answers and untruths. Caroline Leavitt, on the other hand, stepped up with just a couple of sheets of paper, barely glanced at them, and handled every question with clarity and confidence. It was wonderful to see. So, we're going to get into that today on this particular program. Her different approach to the White House press corps and, by extension, the American people, and also some new rules in the press room that I think is a very welcome change. Before we get to that, just a quick update on the future of Tom Jordan Live. After today, we are taking a hiatus to address some potentially exciting new opportunities. And we're looking forward to sharing those with you regarding the program and taking it in a different direction, or maybe just let it lie here as it is. It'll still live on in perpetuity, as I like to say, on YouTube, Facebook, X, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We'll just address all of this down the road. But in a few minutes, what I would like to do, along with Cameron Harris, the director of Tom Jordan Live, he and I are going to share some favorite memories of the program over the past about half a year. In September is when we started, and we'd love to get your feedback as well. So put your comments or your questions in the comments section. We will get to those in just a moment. All right. First, back to the White House press secretary. Karoline Leavitt. Now, I've spoken to her a number of times, and she's always been phenomenal during the Donald Trump campaign for 2024. And she's earned this spot, the youngest press secretary in U.S. history, wasting no time shaking up the D.C. press corps, introducing a new media seat in the White House as well, in the briefing room there, right up front with the big guys, so to speak. And no longer, as a result of this, will the legacy media monopolize access to the president of the United States or just the administration itself. Instead, this move signals a shift towards a broader, more representative press pool, including independent outlets that Americans actually trust. And basically, because of what their resolve was in this last campaign, allowed more Americans to see what was actually happening in this country. And with the Biden administration, despite ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, all those old oligarchs essentially in the media, not covering the realities of what was happening in that particular White House. So as a result, traditional media credibility is at historic lows. Leavitt made it clear the Trump administration will not be playing by the old rules. They have control of the press room, and very, very smart individual at the helm of the basically communications department for the executive branch. It's the decision that she made there, opening up that front row seat, kind of rattled some career journalists who fear losing their privileged status, but it's a necessary correction. And I think for too long, front row correspondents from major networks controlled the narrative, asking all slew of redundant questions while the alternative voices were shut out. Not anymore. So that's a big change in the White House. If you didn't see some of her press conference this week and her answers to some of these questions from the legacy media outlets and pretty much everybody, I'll play a few clips of that later in this particular program. But the message is clear that the American people are actually going to get a clear and straight answer from this administration. I want to bring in a dear friend of mine, a respected leader in the journalism world, a distinguished 50-plus year career in television news. It included a whole slew of key roles across major markets in this country, such as WCBS in New York, KCBS in Los Angeles, also KCOP in Los Angeles, KUSI in the great state of the great city of San Diego, which is where I worked under his direction as the news director of KUSI for about 20 years. I think he was there. WNAC, WXYZ in Detroit as well. Steve Cohen now provides consulting services through his firm, Media Wise Guy Consulting, crisis management, speech writing, working with CEOs, helping them to direct their strategies. Essentially, great guy. And Steve Cohen joins me now back in the program. Steve, it's so good to see you. Thanks for your time.
Hey,
Appreciate it.
it's great to see you, Tom. You know, the this sea change in the Trump administration in terms of what I'm going to call transparency. What a difference. I mean, we're looking at just a few days literally into the new administration. And I think the viewer can certainly see that you may not like um, the approach because it's very straightforward. It's not pandering to what you and I call mainstream media. What it is instead is an honest, surefire approach. And I have to tell you, it's in keeping with everything that's happening in the Trump administration, particularly in terms of the hearings of the folks that he has proposed as to be part of his cabinet. They are articulate, they say what's on their mind, and they do not pander, put up with, or try to engage the people that are their adversaries. They deal with adversaries as adversaries.
Yeah, and they're unapologetic about it. I mean, this is what's happening, whether you like this or not. This is the truth, and they are very effective in redirecting these antagonistic questions. I was watching Peter Alexander with NBC News and his questions towards, the issue of illegal immigration and how they haven't kept their promise because they're actually going after criminals who are not violent. And why is he doing that? And she's like, listen, two things can happen at the same time. We can go after the violent criminals, which we are doing, the rapists, the murderers, the drug dealers. We're going after them, but you could also go after other criminals who are not violent, who have broken the law. And two things can be true at one time. And it's just brilliant the way they handle this unapologetically.
I
So,
think I think when you look at President Trump and the way he has decided to put his cabinet together, and you begin to drill down into what are the nature of these individuals. Well, one, they all do have deep experience, albeit that they're younger people. They're let's call them 40 somethings. They're all 40 somethings, most of them. Some are older, of course, but you look at Patel. You look at JFK Jr., who's sort of in his 70s, but has sort of a younger mindset, certainly
mhm.
a sort of a contrarian. You look at Tulsi Gabbard, particularly. You look at Leavitt, who you mentioned, and they all have the same skill set, which is they are articulate, they're not afraid of the camera, and most importantly, they do not offer respect to people that do not respect them. Now,
Mm.
that's sort of a key because a lot of Washington is about, sucking up to other people, knowing that they don't have respect for you, and putting on this shield of respectability. Who needs it? That's sort of what the Trump administration has said. Pete Hegseth is a fellow who has good social skills, but at the same time, nobody is going to push him around. And in his hearings, you could see that he had real depth of understanding. And also, they do have a sense of humility. These are not folks that are just coming out as though they're the be all and end all. They understand that they have to run very large organizations with people of very different mindsets and different capabilities. And you know what, Tom? That's the key to good management. That's what good management's about.
That is so key because you touched on two things there that a lot of people would seem to think are in contradiction, but they are not. You can be very firm and very bold on your positions and your understanding of the issues, which you mentioned Pete Hegseth was that way, Cash
Mm-hmm.
Patel, the same thing, Tulsi Gabbard. You look at RFK Jr., but they have a humility about them and they recognize their areas of weakness, but they're not going to back down. And I love the fact it is a welcome change. And I'm glad you brought the issue up of we don't have to respect people that completely disrespect us. And I think these confirmation hearings this go around was exactly what that exemplified. Listen, we're firm, we're confident in what we believe is the truth. We're not going to let you manipulate it and steer the direction in a different still the conversation in a different direction. But we're also realize we're all human beings and we're all flawed. And you see that a lot with Pete Hegseth. especially in his own, own personal life and some of the mistakes he made. He
Mhm.
goes, "Yeah, I made a lot of mistakes." But so did all of you up there too. And if you
Right,
want to name those
but I
off,
think the mistake that people used to make is that you think that the senators somehow come from a higher moral ground, and you wish that they did, but they don't. We're not looking at the Everett Dirksons of the world. We're not looking at intellectual giants like William Buckley Jr. What we're looking at are just folks who've got a political mission, and that we know what the mission is, and America rejected the mission. Okay,
hmm
and the result is that when you look at the Democrats interrogating the nominees, you really are sort of taken back by how narrow-minded and willful they are about their ideology, rather than what the hearings are really about is what are we trying to do here with this agency?
hmm
What is it that this agency needs to do to reform itself so that it can become more responsive to its mission, which is the mission of the United States of America. And so when you look at these questions of do you, like Bernie Sanders, do you believe in onesies to JFK Jr.? Do you really think that you're the puppet of 5 different people? I love Tulsi Gabbard yesterday say, "Hey, everybody thinks I'm a puppet of these five people. Are you kidding me?" I mean, how can that even be a discussion point? And then
yeah,
you look at Kash Patel and all of the conspiracy theories, and everyone accuses the right of being in a sense, the foundational place for conspiracy theories in America. Guess what? The left has done a
hmm
really good job of creating their own conspiracy theories and an entire network of conspiracy. The problem is that on the right, you've got a bunch of podcasters and other folks that may create conspiracy theories that are not true as well. But the left has put them inside of the psychology of their
yeah,
entire movement.
yes,
So leadership
mm
of the left, or let's call them the Democrats,
mm.
has memorialized these thoughts that are not true, that deal with the sense of the great right American conspiracy. I'm
Yes,
sorry. If you have 30,000 beds at Gitmo that you can put illegal aliens into, why not?
yeah. Why not? Wait, what's the reason? Because they've been able to prop up the narrative that the what's happening at Gitmo is
Right.
a lot of torture and whatnot, and that's something that's just not the case going
And
on there.
I want to bring up another thing. So
Sure.
we all watched Donald Trump at the initial press conference on the horrible crash that happened in D.C.
Yeah.
And he offered a theory that was a theory, which was that perhaps the use of DEI in the hiring of some people at in terms of air traffic control may have contributed to something that happened in the flight. Well, guess what? It wasn't DEI. It was a lack of staffing, perhaps, certainly with
hmm
lack of staffing with one controller that may have contributed to the cause. But why is the President of the United States not allowed to have a theory, since everyone else in that room has a theory? And he states his theory, and they think it's abhorrent, and they make him out to be someone who's doing something that is horrific. Particularly Miss Caitlin, what's her name? Caitlin from
Uh,
CNN.
oh yeah, yeah. She was in the press room.
Right, so
Collins, Kaylee Collins.
she's giving the
Yeah.
president a hard time about him having a conclusion. He didn't have a
Yeah.
conclusion. He had a theory, and he was
Yeah.
stating it.
Right.
And so, if you are the president of the United States or anyone in his world, and you are bold enough to say what's on your mind, you're going to be castigated by American media. Now, it doesn't matter anymore with CNN because you and I watch CNN. I mean, that's pretty much.
That's
I
about
think
it.
that's it.
Yeah. I think there's another guy down the street as well, but yeah, us three. That's
Yeah,
pretty much
but
it.
I think that this is what we used to call a sea change. This is a sea change.
hmm
The way that the administration is being viewed, which is we're going to say what's on our mind, and we hope that what we say is meaningful, versus American media saying, no, don't say anything. That's Biden. Stay away from the press. That's Biden Harris. And when you do talk to the press, talk in vapid generalities. That's Harris. Well, guess what? That's not the way the world is right now. Why? Because America needs action, and America needs foresight, and it needs people to move forward. And in those moves, you're going to make some mistakes. You're going to go down the wrong path, but at least you're activated. And I think that's the difference between American governance today and American governance just 30 or 40 days ago is this need to be for activation. Now, does it
I
not mean they were going to have mistakes? Sure. I mean, look at the Trump coming out with the freeze on money, right? Which he had to
right.
build back. Well, look, okay, I get that.
Yeah. The thing I think is what has been lacking over the past several years, and the people in this country can see it. They're hungry and thirsty for that the stopping of the gaslighting, saying these things aren't happening when we can see they are. I mean, we can go down the list of what's happening with the border, or if what people want to talk about, yeah, there were some side effects to these vaccines that we were mandated to be taken. We're not allowed to say that, but that is the truth, and everyone knows that's always been the case with a variety of medications. So people are like, listen, we just want someone to speak straight with us. And I think you look at Caroline Leavitt, she's very accomplished. She's a young woman, 27 years old, but brilliant, a ton of experience already in her young age. So she goes out there, and her briefing, I think, was overwhelmingly positive among those who I think value direct unscripted communication, and a lot of actors. I think James Woods came out. A lot of people in just regular common day folks are saying finally we're getting some answers about what's happening here. When you look at her, no dancing around the facts kind of approach to this, no avoidance of questions. Why do you think this approach? Obviously, it's a stark contrast to Karine Jean-Pierre. But why do you think this is, or maybe you don't, but do you think this is now going to be effective in that they're going to, despite the media, despite the Caitlin Collins and the whoever, the media outlets out there, do you think the American people are going to look at this favorably, getting direct answers, honest answers in the long term?
I think it's about um, honesty. I mean, is she going to create bromides that she's sort of memorized and that she's going to bring forward? Look, she has a great natural set of skills in terms of being a communicator. That's why she was chosen. And that skill set is powerful, but you can't be someone that's on the rostrum who's laying out bromides about the administration over and over because it gets old after a while. And also, you have to develop a way of communicating that doesn't make everybody in the room feel like they're in the fifth grade listening to their fifth grade teacher. And she does have that syndrome. So there's something about having the power of communication skills that, when used in that way, that it can make the audience feel that they're lesser, not equal. And and she's not talking to the media, she's talking to America. And America doesn't want to feel like we're lesser and she's smarter than us. She needs to be sharing that information with all of us as Americans, because that's what it's about. If you look at this as a contest, meaning a fencing match between her and the media, well, that's sort of interesting to observe and watch, but it doesn't really take the narrative forward into the hearts of the American people. What the American people want to know is, what is the president doing
Yeah.
that's being questioned, that has answers that are going to bring his agenda forward and help me? Ultimately, it's about that. The communication in that room, you think you're communicating with the media, you're not. Today, you're communicating directly with the American public, and I don't want to sit there and be lectured to. I
Yeah.
understand she has
Correct.
great skill sets, but I'm sorry, skill sets aren't enough. There's something called empathy and lack of hubris. And what she did exhibit, which I think was wrong, is hubris. I'm smarter than you. I am more lucid. I am articulate, and I can wrestle with you all day, and I'm going to win. Okay, that's fine. But
Well,
after a
what
while,
would
it's
be
not
the
that.
proper approach?
After a
Say,
while, it's not that interesting.
but if you get a Peter Alexander who's asking, ridiculous questions, or like a Caitlin Collins, because you brought her up before, what
Mhm.
would be the proper way to respond to those? You got to have some. Don't you think you have to have some sense of hubris? Like you are wrong, and the whole premise of your question is flawed. How do you pivot back to what's
Well, I
best
don't,
for the
I
American
don't, I
people?
don't see. I don't think if I was advising her, I'd say, look, critique is not what's important. Critiquing the question does that's just the game. That's the fencing match. Why do you want to fence? Just answer the question. The critiquing the question is just a way of getting at people that you don't like and putting them in their place. I don't want Caitlin to be put in their place. I just want her question answered. If you think it's a lousy question, okay, answer the question. And in your answer, you then give your sense of feelings about the validity of the inquiry. Uh, it's the conversation of people who are policymakers is not to say that the person that's inquiring is somehow wrong in asking the question. Their job is to ask questions. Now, if someone is nefarious and is asking questions to get you, or won't get off of something that you've already answered, well, that's different. Then you have to call them out on it. I'm not saying don't be bold. What I'm saying is, be communicative.
Yeah.
What is important about that question? Well, and I have to say, I think Donald Trump's very good at it. He will take a jibe at uh, a reporter, but he always answers. He does first answer the question. He will say, here's what I think, and here's why." Or like
Yeah.
the other day, he said, "Well, why do you think that, Mr. President?" Well, it's common sense. Some
Yeah.
people don't have common sense, but I think it's common sense. That's my answer. Okay, now you can buy that or you can reject that, but that's the president's answer. And he's not taking on the correspondent, which is not to say that some of them don't deserve it. I'm just saying I don't think it's probative.
Yeah, and it's also not the best way for the American people. The whole point of having a press secretary is to inform the populace, as you described. So, in to that goal, that's the end game here. So, the Biden administration, they revoked like 400 different press credentials with a lot of media outlets that they just
Mm-hmm.
simply didn't like under the guise of implementing new standards of who's allowed in and who's not going to be having access to the president. A lot of people saw that as this blatant attempt to really silence the independent journalists. Now, this White House is reversing that. Karoline Leavitt is now, put a kibosh on those restrictions and is allowing new media, they call it, to come in and even have a front row seat. How do you think that's going to benefit, or will it benefit, do you think, us who are watching these press conferences from afar?
Well, I don't, I think it's a nice idea. I think inclusion is always better than excluding the media. You never know whether you're going to get a question that is from an outlier that's meaningful. But frankly, reading and being a student of all the so-called new media, um, and I think some, and obviously some have great legitimacy, like you look at Breitbart, great legitimacy there. You look at some of the other smaller outfits from town to town that are doing their best job to offer alternative voices, but not all of them are valid. And I don't think that you're going to learn something. There's something about being in the White House press corps and being in the room that somehow takes away some of your piss and vinegar, and you
Hmm.
wind up being somewhat more mainstream just because you walk into the room, and that's not so bad. We do want to be circumspect about what we say, but to answer your question directly, I don't think it brings much to the table. I think it's a nice idea, and whether or not there's any revelations that come out of the type of Q&A that comes from someone in alternate media is a question mark for me. Let's see how it goes.
Probably a good idea though that she's answering questions from a broad spectrum of ideologies, because that's what the media has kind of represented of different ideologies within the United States. So on that perspective, you mentioned Breitbart, but Axios was in there as well. You got Politico. These are new media outlets, but they also have different ideologies. That mix, though, do you think that's good?
I think it is good, but I don't think it's good if you don't veer from the standard Q&A. What I'm looking for is, can we not make the White House press briefings about some things that are just broader than the standard politics and government discussion, right? So the way America works today is you have maybe three, maybe four topics that are in the news cycle on any given day, and when you get to the White House press briefing, it comes down to two or three that are concerns and controversy, and that's fine. I'm not saying get rid of that, but you've got other things like look at what's happening in Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. I
Hmm.
mean, that's a serious situation right now. That's again spinning out of control. America's had their hands in there before. So has the United Nations. What's hap? Let's talk about Rwanda. Let's talk about Lay's potato chips and what they did wrong that is causing this enormous recall. Let's talk about Whammo cars that are unmanned going into major cities now, even though they don't have a clue of whether they're going to go in circles or whether they're going to take you to the airport in one piece. I mean, these are all national issues that require some scrutiny. For instance, I would have asked the question of the president went to California to meet with Governor Newsom. Does the president still feel that Governor Newsom is a obstructionist to his policies? That's a good question. So I'm
Yeah,
saying
right.
expand the number of people, expand the voices, expand the content. Let America learn more, at least one or two questions about things that are not in that select four of the American agenda on a given news cycle.
Yeah, that's maybe where the press secretary kind of guide and steer the conversation. If they get a kind of a cheap shot question once again, or a gotcha question, they can say, "Okay, here's the answer to that." But let's really talk about the serious things that are happening today. Rwanda, Lay's potato chip, or what's happening in the Congo. There's a number of issues. You're correct, and maybe that would be her job going forward if she can focus on those key issues that she wants to get out to the public on that any given day. Do you miss Sam Donaldson and the old school of ABC News and NBC? Mike Wallace back in those days when they would ask those questions, some of them of an international flavor. Um, do you miss those days?
I miss the civility. That's what I missed. I think that the the history of governance in America had a certain civility to it. Now, there was a reason for that. It's because we had smaller outlets of information, and there was a common ground that was brought about by having fewer, almost no real proliferation of outlets. You had the evening news, you had your morning newspaper, your afternoon newspaper, your radio station, and Walter Cronkite and Jennings and those fellows. And I think that that had great value. I do miss that. I miss everyone being on the same page, or what the president's calling common sense. I think that a return to that, or what I like to call a return to reason,
Mm,
that perhaps this is a time for that, because we've had so much dialogue in these silos of information, that if we could just all get out of our silos into this place called common ground,
yeah,
and when we're on the same ground, using that analogy, and you can see us all in the same field,
yeah.
talking to each other, and that's where productivity comes from. As
I
long as we remain in our silos without any civility, screaming at each other, the cacophony of sound and debate is overwhelming, and I think that's what happened to America. We all were just overwhelmed by the end of the last election, and sort of just said, can we all just shut up and let's take steps to move us all forward?
Love it. Yeah, even journalists used to get along, and we didn't have really ideologies that permeated newsrooms nowadays. You could be a conservative, a liberal, it didn't matter. We didn't really know in the various newsrooms, and we used to work better together. And now you're right, it's so siloed and so splintered off, and everyone's waiting for the next, mic drop moment. That's a news story nowadays versus actually legitimate information.
I
Steve,
think I
yeah,
wanted to say something about newsrooms. I do think that um, newsrooms used to be about, you could have very strong and powerful opinions, but nobody cared. Nobody ever asked me on my way up at CBS who was I, what did I think about pop. No, what they asked me was, what do I think about story? What do I think about what we're selecting? What do I think about the proportionality of what we're putting on television? And are we covering the news the way we should, locally and nationally and internationally?
yeah,
That's that's the thing that's missing. You can have your viewpoint and you can own it, and you should, but then put it aside. We all have bias, but the key to great newsrooms is put your bias aside and be biased towards one thing, which is giving the public that you serve the information that is the most accurate, probative, and thoughtful, so that you can offer context as a professional journalist to the people that you serve and are watching you. And that, I think, is what's missing in the proliferation of newsrooms, particularly local newsrooms around the country today.
People can see just by your words here why you are one of the greatest journalists and news directors I think this country has ever seen. It was a privilege to work for you for so many years back in California and San Diego at KUSI. But Steve Cohen's been all over the world, really. You got a great book from what Arkansas to Aruba. You've got two
Yeah.
books or memoirs of your career, and a eulogy on the state of media right now. But it's wonderful. You have a wealth of experience. I learn a lot every time I speak with you. Steve Cohen is now with Media Wise Guy Consulting. Look him up. He is a breath. Read his books, Breath of Fresh Air. It's always really good to see you, Steve, and talk with you. And
You too.
I'll probably be giving you a call later today.
Let's talk. And thanks for giving me the time to just sort of spout off on a Friday afternoon, Friday morning
Yeah.
about these issues. They do matter, Tom, and you've been a real champion of trying to get these sorts of ideas out there and creating a dialogue for the country. And I'm looking forward to whatever your next step is.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Well, I've been trying to emulate the best, and you're the best out there. Steve Cohen, thank you. Appreciate it. Good to see you. We'll talk soon.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah. So this is what the last point he made there. You got to think about what newsrooms used to be, what they used to be like. And I used to work in those newsrooms under Steve, one of the greatest newsrooms I've ever worked in, because that was his approach to news. And there was an understanding that everybody walks into this place of work with an opinion about something. And we would sometimes hash those things out in private dialogue, sometimes yelling and screaming at each other. Newsrooms were crazy places to work, but we all did it with an air of respect and knowing at the end of the day that stuff wasn't going to seep into our stories and in the newscast, because if they did, there were pretty heavy consequences to pay. And so, but we also had respect for the industry and the whole purpose why we there was a freedom of the press in the first place, the First Amendment, why we were there, what we were trained to do. The training has changed dramatically in a lot of different journalism schools at various universities. It's not what it used to be, and I do hope that the pendulum further swings back to the great days of Steve Cohen as the Steve Cohen-esque leaders throughout this country in pretty much every single newsroom back then. So we'll talk with Steve Cohen again. I don't know if we will on Tom Jordan Live, because this is the final episode of that. But excuse me, I have a little bit of a I don't know if they're allergies or whatnot. I just a final point on this. Listen, the White House briefing room, it belongs to the American people, not the corporate media. And for decades, a handful of media elitists have controlled the narrative by monopolizing front row seats. And now the narrative again has gotten far worse in very recent years out of that exact room from which the press secretary and the president speaks to you and me through these reporters. And so often, I can't tell you how many times I've sat through a press conference and then watched the coverage or read the coverage, and it is almost entirely different than what had occurred during that press conference. Because again, they're looking for the mic drop moment, the thing that's going to stir debate and division and argumentation amongst individuals. And that's not how it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a place of information so Americans can know what's going on in this country and around the world. So to that point, I think Karoline Leavitt and under Donald Trump, they've opened up the press briefing room to different, ideologically different news outlets in addition to the ones that are far left and progressive. And I think her decision to introduce a new media seat, it disrupts the monopoly in a sense. It ensures, we are going to hear from voices outside of the establishment echo chamber. So it's a good thing. All right, I want to take some of your comments and questions, and we're going to get to a couple important topics regarding orthopedics and what's going on right now in the orthopedic industry. Let's start. Cameron Harris is watching those. Vaughn Westerby, speaking of senators, how are people like Mazie Hirono be in the Senate? Did you hear her questions to these candidates? She is a lunatic. I did hear some of her questions, and I found them to be, I wouldn't say the word offensive. I just think completely out of touch with reality in so many cases. And again, it goes back to these senators on these committees do not respect in any sense, at least they're not projecting any sense of respect to the nominees that are being questioned. And they should. And I think Steve Cohen is correct. And I think that the proper response now under this administration is if they're not going to show you respect, you don't have to show them respect either. because it doesn't do anybody any good, and it further, I think, empowers these senators with very strong biases and far left progressive leanings. It enhances the power that they wield with those narratives. Instead of, listen, you can dismantle the narrative with just a couple of words and then answer the proper question in the proper way. So, yeah, thanks for that. Appreciate it. Let's bring up another one here. All right, let's ramp them through. Let's go through them one by one here. We got quite a few. Lee Santiago, thank you for bringing Steve back. Maybe we can trust legacy media again when the Soros money, I think is what you meant. It says Sorod, but I think it's Soros money backed networks are exposed. Yeah, I'm telling you, Steve Cohen's the real deal. He is one of the best news guys out there, and he's been doing it for what, 5 decades in some of the biggest markets in this country. New York, big time there. At WCBS. He worked alongside the guys at 60 Minutes back then when it was a respected news magazine. Worked at KCBS in Los Angeles. A lot of stations. I think he was in, I don't know, it was Nashville. He was in Detroit, WXYZ, back in the day with Bill Bonds. That was Steve Cohen run newsroom when it was highly respected, one of the most respected newsrooms in the country. And then when I worked for him at KUSI in San Diego, he had a 20-year run there, and it was phenomenal. Very unique, kind of made his mark in that market as well. So, yeah, great guy. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. All right, another one here. It is... Okay, we're going to take one more. Then we'll go to some of the stories, and then we'll go back to some comments. Joe Biden called Kyle Rittenhouse a white supremacist without a shred of evidence. His theory was never corrected or questioned by the media. Isn't that amazing that he got away with that? And, Barack Obama said a lot of horrible things, too, about police officers and white people also. And they don't correct it because the media is in lockstep with these far-left progressives. And that was Joe Biden's theory. Yeah, Donald Trump comes out with a theory the other day regarding this plane crash. It was probably incorrect, but it was something he was thinking about. But his broader point was correct, that we focus too much on DEI, quotas than experience and merit-based hiring practices. And the fact of the matter is, why wasn't one of the busiest airports in the country, why wasn't it fully staffed? It is one of the busiest airspaces in the world, actually. I know Atlanta is very busy also, probably the busiest in the country. But when you talk about the airspace that's going on around Ronald Reagan National Airport in Arlington, Virginia, just outside D.C., just over the Potomac, you got to have a full staff, and they've been understaffed for quite some time. Why was that allowed under the previous, Transportation Secretary, Pete Buttigieg? That's got to be remedied. It's got to be fixed. Bring more air traffic controllers in, whatever it takes. All right, quick break from that. And then I want to talk about some things here regarding your knees. There is something called a partial knee replacement, and it's great for young people. Like if you're very active and you've injured your knee, this is a lot of young people getting this particular operation, a partial knee replacement. It's the game changer for those who aren't really ready for a full knee overhaul but need relief fast. Who's a candidate for this? What's the recovery like? And is this the solution that can keep you active without the downtime of a full replacement? Orthopedic surgeon Dr. Matthew Cade joined me with some answers. Dr. Matthew Cade is back with us, advanced orthopedic specialist. It's good to see you. Thanks for your time.
Tom. Hey, how are you?
Good, thank you. So, partial knee replacements, you think about that. I guess one of the benefits is that you get to basically preserve more of the natural knee structure while enhancing, I guess, the mobility in the knee. So talk about, what is a partial knee replacement? What are the advantages of choosing that?
Yeah, well, sometimes people wear out their joints just on one side or the other. So more typically, it's on the inside of your knee. And the other compartments have great cartilage and are not causing symptoms. So a partial is basically, we isolate that inside area and we just replace that part, which is great. And then people, we take less bone. People do really well. It's a little bit less invasive than a total knee replacement.
Okay, so you're leaving a big chunk of the knee, for lack of a better phrasing of that, in place. Mm-hmm. And so that I'm sure reduces much of the trauma that a patient would go through, and probably reduces the recovery time?
Oh yeah, yeah. People are usually feeling pretty good within a week or two. People can get back to sports within anywhere from 1 to 3 months, depending on the person. And a partial knee replacement feels a lot more natural, like your regular knee. With a total knee replacement, we remove the ACL, the anterior cruciate ligament. But with a partial, we leave it. We leave pretty much everything except for the damaged cartilage, and we're able to get in. Takes about 45 minutes, give or take, and people go home same day.
A lot of patients are a little hesitant. Anytime you talk about surgery, they want to get all the nuts and bolts and all the data behind it, make sure that there's going to be a good recovery time. They lower any chance of any risks. A lot of concerns they might have about post-surgical pain as well. When it comes to this particular procedure, how would you address those concerns from the patient?
The patients who get partials still will get a nerve block with a catheter with pain medicine. They'll still get anti-inflammatories. They'll still get all the same protocol we use for a total knee replacement, but their pain is so much less that they just recover faster. So
When a lot of people assume, okay, when you talk about a knee replacement, you're thinking these are the older adults out there who have worn it out over maybe several decades. But we know there's a very active younger generation.
correct.
And so if it's just a partial knee that needs to potentially be replaced, is that due oftentimes to maybe athletics or sports injuries or just a very active younger adult?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, people who are younger who maybe had a meniscus tear in their 30s or 40s, that compartment of their knee might wear out sooner. And if all they have is cartilage damage and a meniscus tear, sometimes the partial will get them back to sports even faster.
So back to that point, so if you have a torn meniscus and you don't want, to deal with it later down the road, what should you do with that torn meniscus?
Well, if you don't have arthritis and you have a meniscus tear, still the gold standard would be a knee arthroscopy, where we put a camera in and trim it up or repair it. But if there's arthritis with your meniscus tear, if it's bad enough, then yeah, the correct answer would be just replace it. That
Okay.
compartment.
Wow, very interesting. Okay, so now we deal with some of the maybe complications that sometimes you see in certain surgical procedures. When you compare it to a complete, like total knee replacement, when you're looking at lower risks of blood clots, infections, maybe excessive stiffness, or what are some of the things that you would look at, but maybe it's less complicated based on the partial aspect of this particular procedure?
Yeah, so for stiffness, the fancy word is arthropfibrosis. A lot less stiffness seen in a partial knee replacement. Infection rates are roughly the same; they're somewhere around 2%. But yeah, post-op pain, numbness, tingling, all that is slightly less with a partial.
Okay.
So
When people get a knee replacement, if it's partial or even full, the assumption is, okay, they're going to stop doing a lot of activities because, they've got now maybe something that's not the natural deal. What is the reality of it? If you get a partial, maybe even a full, are you able to go out and live basically your normal life or maybe engage in the physical activities you did prior to that?
yeah, especially with a partial. I mean, I have patients who run marathons, who do Tough Mudders, all that, and it's slightly more common if it's a partial. People, like I said, it's a more natural knee, and they get back to sports. Their athletic ability is better with a partial than a total. Not that you can't get back to those things with a total, but it's just less of a procedure, and you get back to sports sooner with a partial.
Okay, so you can stay active.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
All right. Remind folks how they can get a hold of you if they're interested in learning more.
Yeah, Dr. Matthew Cade on Facebook and Instagram, and then advancedorthopedics.net on the internet.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Good to
that's the
see you.
group.
Dr. Matthew Cade,
All right,
Advanced
thank you.
Orthopedic Specialist. Thanks so much. Hey, before I let him go, I also spoke to him about robotic surgery, and I thought it sounded a bit ominous at first. Well, no, he says, actually, it can be a perfect choice for some. Here's that very quick conversation. Watch this, then we'll get back to some of your comments. And we are back with Dr. Matthew Cade with Advanced Orthopedic Specialist. Good to see you again.
Hey, Tom, how are you?
Good, fantastic. I have heard about robotics being used in surgery for quite some time. It's been many years now, but you're using it, I know, in knee replacements as well at Advanced Orthopedic Specialists. What are some of the advantages of involving robots in the procedure?
For a robotic procedure, we match the CT data with live markers on the bone, actually. So we blend those together, and we can plan our cuts to the millimeter, to a half a millimeter,
Ooh.
and to a degree, so we can be extremely precise in the ways that we do your knee surgery. So it's very cool technology that's been around for maybe 20 years, give or take. Yeah.
Is it the go-to method? I mean, do you look at that and say, every patient, we're going to use robotic techniques in this, or is it customized pertaining to which patient is coming in and if they feel comfortable with that or
For
not?
me, it's just patient preference, and it's
Okay.
depending on their pattern of arthritis. So some people, I think they're great candidates, but some people will do it for almost everybody. So I think that some of the more complex cases, I feel more comfortable if it's just in my hands and I take the robot out of it. But for most standard arthritic patients, they would be a candidate for a robotic.
Is it like partial? You can use the robotic mechanism as an assistant in the procedure, or is it either one or the other?
The one that I use, it's called the Mako robot. So it typically plans all your cuts and how the knee balances, and then I put the knee replacement in like normal, but it just sets everything up for me. So it is kind of, I don't hit a button and it takes care of the knee replacement,
Sure.
but it kind of it assists me. Yes.
So is it in the implant positioning of it? Is that so you have the cuts aspect of it,
Yep.
down to the half a millimeter you said, I believe, and also the positioning of the implant. What does that look like?
Yeah. So when I map it all out, they have a screen with a 3D image of the current knee and where I can put the implant, and I put it exactly where I want it, and then we lock it in, and then that's where we make our cuts.
You look at traditional knee replacements, and that often would require the surgeon to rely on, visual estimates, which I know you do, and you do it very well. And I know the more experience you have in doing that, the more accurate and better the outcomes are going to be. And the manual guides to the implant alignments, I guess, is how you would really depend on that. But the robotic systems, they use, as you described, the advanced imaging to create more of a patient-specific cut. So how far in advance are you planning that based on your patients?
Well, we have to get a CT scan, like I said, so we could do it as early as 3 to 4 weeks after we decide to do surgery. We can usually get people in pretty quick for that CT, and we map it out and go from there. But it's definitely more precise and a little bit less invasive with the robot. Manual knees and robotics have similar long-term outcomes. But for certain people, I think they're a good candidate. It helps them. So
When your patients hear about robotic surgery, what's their reaction?
most people, they're interested. They think it's pretty cool, and they want to they have a lot of questions about it, and they just want to know kind of the logistics of it. And there's a few extra things that are involved. So there's a few different pin sites. So we have to do a couple small incisions on the tibia and the femur to put these arrays on the leg, which helps us map everything else. There's a few little additional things that we do, but overall, people are they're curious, and it's fun to talk about.
Are there better outcomes in terms of like ligament preservation when you're using the robot versus not?
Yeah, I can release less. I think with the robot, at least in my hands, I can release less. So it's slightly minimally invasive compared to the other way.
Okay,
So,
very good. Well, it's exciting. You're using technology in your practice. How can people get hold of you?
So Dr. Matthew Cade on Facebook and Instagram, and then advancedortho.net online, and we're right here in Brighton. So come and see us.
Very simple. Very good. Thanks so much. Dr. Matthew Cade, Advanced Orthopedic Specialist.
Thanks, Tom.
All right, thanks so much. All right, good guy. And I want to thank Dr. Matthew Cade for being just a huge support for us here at Tom Jordan Live over the past 5 months since we launched on September 16th was our first show. Today, it's technically show number 92. It's our 92nd episode of Tom Jordan Live. If you're not counting our election night coverage, we had a 3-hour special that night as well. And I think we had a pre-episode as well. So it might be 94 that we've had. But, technically, sequentially, it's episode 92. And that's where we're going to leave it as we're going on hiatus. And we'll figure out what our next movie is here at Tom Jordan Live. But I want to thank you for being a part of this. I want to bring in Cameron Harris as well, because Cameron and I have been working on this together since its inception with Rob Johnson. Rob Johnson is the one who launched Wayne radio. And I want to thank him. He is a very savvy, business minded entrepreneur, very successful individual who cares deeply about his employees and his people. And he and I have established a really good friendship over the years. And I love the man. He's also has a separate company called Wayne Media Group. And it's a consulting firm, and he decided to launch this, and it's just been great. It's been a wonderful experience. I want to thank Rob Johnson, Julia Peeler, the entire staff at Wayne Radio, Adam, of course. I can't name all the people. There's a lot of people who work here in this room, but each one of them is incredibly special and valuable, and it's been great to know each one of them. Cameron Harris is, of course, one of those guys. Cameron, are you there? Are you going to join me here? There you are. What's up, buddy?
Maybe.
Okay, so what do you think? So we started. You and I met last summer. You came on to help launch the show, and we started really going at it in August, trying to get everything in place and working on graphics, which you've done. And Caleb, Emma, of course, joined you in that as well. He did. You guys work very well together. But you look through the past several months and all the people that have come on the program, what are some of your biggest takeaways, some of your favorite moments of Tom Jordan Live?
Probably some of my favorite moments would be the election night that we had.
Yeah.
It was just very kind of run and gun, off the cuff, see what was what results were coming in, and just kind of making the best of anything that came our way.
Yeah. It's kind of scary when you're doing that, right? Because you don't know really what's next. How are we going to fill 3 hours worth? Because, we don't have commercials. We just go straight. If it's an hour podcast, we're talking for an hour straight. 3 hours on election night after doing the hour that morning and coming back the following morning after that was tough, but it's also very exciting. Live television. Your background, you do a lot of, post editing, kind of film productions. How has this been different for you in terms of, compare and contrast to what you've been familiar with in your kind of your video career?
Well, it's definitely different. There's a lot less work afterwards because there's a lot more work on the front end,
right.
getting it all put together so that it runs smoothly, and then maybe you tweak a few things afterwards. But no, it's just kind of a different dynamic. Which has been a lot of fun. Which I'd also like to point out, going back to like favorite things or whatever, I recall you being very tired on election night.
Yeah, I was exhausted because it'd been a long day already.
Exactly.
But I have a thing. I'm a morning person, so when you're talking about doing something till midnight, it used to be when I was younger, we did evening newscasts and television. I was more accustomed to that, but I don't mind sharing my age. I'm proud. I'm 55 years old. I'm now allowed to live in those communities that they make specifically for people like me now. So if I ever decide to do that, I'm eligible for it. I don't think my kids can move with me, so we'll hold off a little bit, kids.
You'll have to do a live stream from there.
We'll do it from there, yeah. I really enjoyed that night. I think I love election night coverage. It's always a challenge, and I've been doing that now for, I think, about 25, 26 years. My first election night was in 1998. I was working for a NBC affiliate in Kennewick, Washington.
I was born.
Yeah, that was before you were born? Or the year you were born?
No, that was the year I was born.
Oh, yeah. So I think we covered your birth. It was like the first birth of the year, I think. No, just kidding. Yeah. Yeah, you make me feel old, but I'm okay with that again. So that's pretty amazing. So you've been alive for by the exact length of my entire career, essentially. I didn't know that until today. See, we're still getting to know each other after all this time.
Exactly.
I really enjoyed that night as well. I've enjoyed many of my interviews. We've had a lot of, very well-known people, some people not very well-known. It doesn't matter who you are in terms of your fame or, whatever you call it, societal intrigue. I love talking to everybody. And some of my best interviews, most enjoyable and enlightening interviews for me have been with just folks like you and me who are just, struggling or whatever the issue is. They got a story to tell. And this is the place that we've been allowing people to tell it, because I guess my favorite, if you look at the general perspective of why I loved this program, Tom Jordan Live, is because we gave a voice to people who felt like they no longer had a voice in legacy media. And that was what was so troubling to me when I worked, a few years ago now, in that space because people were absolutely being ignored. And I would say it is about 50% of the country felt that they were being silenced. It was rough to see. And it was rough to see from the other side of it what that looked like in a various newsroom editorial decisions that seemed very, very biased. So I got out of that. And so I've been very grateful to this opportunity. Cameron, so you're watching some comments. Can
Hmm.
we bring them up while we're both on the screen?
Sure.
Okay, let's go one by one. We'll see who's out there. You've got privy to this. I don't know who's going to respond here, but we'll bring them up. Brooks Gibbs. I got a great story about Brooks. Thanks for everything you do. You're a good man, Tom. Brooks, thank you. Listen, Brooks Gibbs, if you don't know him, he's a PhD psychologist. I can think a school psychologist is what he's been, but he's been on the scene for many years. And I first met him, I think it was in the early 2000s, out in the desert of California, and then in San Diego. We both lived out there. He moved to Michigan. I ended up moving to Michigan, and now he's in Florida, the great free state of Florida. But so our second episode on Tom Jordan Live, we had the whole live element of this. We had a guest not show up, or they were having trouble connecting, and we have a live program starting at 9 a.m. Eastern. And I thought, who can I call? And really, one of the most reliable individuals, a friend that's always available whenever. Sometimes we don't talk for several months, but when we do talk, it's like we just pick it up where we left off. He picked up the phone, and I said, "Listen, our guest is not showing up. Can you come on? And we're going to switch the topic entirely, but we'll talk to you about, I forgot the topic now, but it was a good topic. He's an expertise in. I think it was the media, the transition, how to deal with anxiety, and all these kinds of things." He
Yeah,
says,
some
"Yep,
sort of psychology
yeah,
topic.
the psychology angle on current events." And he picked it up. He drove down to his studio and got on the air with us, so to speak, in about 20 minutes. And it was one of the best shows we had. The feedback for that show and to Brooks Gibbs specifically was so positive, and they just love what he had to say. Go to, I think it's brooksgibbs.com. He also has, forgive me, I forget his other website. If you're watching, you can text me, Brooks, and I'll get the other website. But he deals with resilience and teaching resilience in not just children, but in adults, because we all need that right now. And so he's a brilliant educator. He's a brilliant psychologist, a very caring individual. And again, just a good friend, always available when people need him. Brooks, love you, brother. Thank you for your time. And if you text me the other website you have, I'll put it up here.
No,
all right.
I remember that night.
Yeah.
Actually, that morning.
That morning.
Where it was like 20 minutes before the show was supposed to start.
Yes.
And you just contacted him. He said he would be on. So then you completely wrote like a whole new script in 15, 20 minutes
Yeah.
to span the hour like that.
Yes.
And so that was
It was
just
crazy.
super impressive, especially early on.
Yeah, thank you. But yeah, it was crazy. But that's live television, and that's what we would often have to do. And our guest that day, I'm not going to say who he was, but he was at the border, and that's why he wasn't able to connect. There were some connection issues. We're trying to get connected with him at the U.S.-Mexico border. So, politician. Okay, let's bring up another one. Vaughn Westerby. Tom, I'm so sorry to hear you're leaving YouTube, although I understand why. I'll be looking for you in your new way forward. Thanks. Thanks, Vaughn. Vaughn, I appreciate you for being a part of this program. This really is some of the most fun I have had in my career. Seriously. And I'll just give kudos to Cameron here, because Cameron is a professional. He is a detail-oriented individual, and he's the guy behind the scenes making sure everything works. And I can't tell you how many times he said, "Tom, you forgot to send this video over," or "Tom, you didn't do this," or "Tom." I'm like, "Yeah, you're right. Thank you." So he's on top of it. So Cameron, I appreciate you, bud. But he's really a big reason why this show continues. Vaughn, it was a pleasure to have you a part of it. We'll let you know what the next move is. Let's bring up another comment here. Harry Sakalian. Hi, Tom. Many of us are hoping and praying that your voice finds a bigger and better platform to keep your clear thinking in the public square. As I mentioned to you, I put you in the esteemed category of Thomas Sowell. Wow. Yeah, you mentioned Charles Kratheimer as well, etc. When it comes to clear thinking and wisdom. That's a huge compliment, Harry. Good luck to you and your team. Regards, Harry Sakalian. Yeah, Harry surprised me one morning. He came in actually to our headquarters in Brighton, Michigan, on the outskirts of Detroit, Michigan, and he was in the lobby. And I knew him because of his regular commentary on this particular program and been a faithful and a very faithful supporter of this program. So he popped in. It was a pleasure to talk with him and to meet him. We took a photo together. So Harry, I really appreciate you. It was great to see you face to face. We will keep in contact, and I'll give you an update on what the next move is. Thank you, Harry. Great compliment. It means a lot to me. Appreciate it.
Oh wait, do I get to say hi Tom, hi Harry?
Yeah. Yep. That's our little shtick. All right. We have another one, or is that?
Yeah, we got a couple more.
Okay. We'll bring up a couple more, then we'll say so long. Jim Chikowski. Oh, say it ain't so. Tom, you have an excellent show, and so glad you're able to share your views with us. Your show covers local and countrywide topics, which mostly goes unmentioned. Don't leave us. Jim, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And Jim has also been a very faithful supporter and regular commenter on the show, and I appreciate your words, and I love what I do. And I'm not going to stop doing what I do. So again, we'll announce what the next move is. So just stay tuned. I'm going to keep the same Facebook and X, and we'll make announcements on YouTube as well. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it. All right, one more.
Two more.
Two more. Orlando Hodges, Tom and Cab, my wife and I are sad to hear this. Please stay in touch so we can support you. Our news life will be empty. Orlando, so good. Thank you for your comments. Orlando came down on election night, speaking of, and we had a small election night party for some of our viewers and listeners, and there he is. The election night was so much fun and memorable. Yeah, Orlando was so good to see you. And Orlando and I first met, I think it was in 2013 during the initial Mike Duggan mayoral campaign in the city of Detroit, and there were like, I don't know, 35 different candidates running for mayor. We had this somewhat of a ridiculous debate that I moderated with the likes of Debbie Dingle and with I think it was Nolan Finley, and they were a part of that. So that was when Orlando, during that time frame, he and I first met. It had been a long time since I'd seen him, so he came that night, and we got to kind of be reacquainted with one another. So I appreciate you and your wife. You guys have been great. We'll stay in contact for sure. Orlando, thanks so much. Was that the two?
One more.
One more. Okay. The engineer. Love you, brother. One day I got to find out your real name. Great guests. Great interaction with comments. You cover local, state, national news, a common sense approach to the news. Great job, Tom and Cameron. The engineer, I appreciate you so much. And the engineer was part of our Patreon audience as well. And just so appreciate your support for the very beginning. Send me an email. Let me know who you really are, the engineer, and we'll stay in contact. Appreciate you very much.
I think our second week of the show was when we first started doing comments like this.
Yeah.
And I think he was on the first episode when we did that.
I think it was. I remember his name, the engineer. So, by the way, I wonder if I know him because I know many engineers, and maybe he's one of those engineers that I have befriended over my years here in the state of Michigan. Maybe not, but he is a friend. So the engineer, I appreciate you big time. I really do. Thank you. Always very smart comments too, very intellectual, sophisticated, and really right to the point. So Cameron, it's been a pleasure, my friend.
It's been
working
fun
with you. And when we no longer work together, maybe we'll become Facebook friends too.
Exactly. I think I'll add you after this.
Yeah, I appreciate it so much. And to the viewers and the listeners, God bless you. Thank you so much. Listen, I'm not leaving Michigan. I'm staying right here. And if you ever want to, celebrate Sundays with me, come by and say hello at Calvary Chapel in Waterford. That's where I pastor a small church in Waterford. We meet at a school. There's a Waterford Montessori school. On Wednesday nights, we have a Bible study. Tuesday night, we have men's and women's groups there. And then on Sundays, we have a regular service at 10 a.m. I would love to meet you, but we're simple. We worship, music. We go through the Bible together. It's Bible-centric, but for a lot of joy. And then after that, we have coffee and donuts and cake and just get to really know each other. And we stay in contact throughout the week. It's a close-knit group of people who love the Lord, are grateful for what God has done in our lives, and we just want to share that in the best way we know how. So you're always welcome to come by Calvary Chapel in Waterford. God bless you. Thanks again for your time. And Cameron and I say so long. Take care.
Good night.
Good night.